Hello and welcome to Synchronized Swimming, Fish, Food and the Future. My name is Anne-Kristine Øen and I'm Director for the Norwegian Seafood Council in the US. Now, I have with me today Ingebjørg Oddsdotter Sævareid, who is Head of Fish Health and Nutrition at Salmon Group in Norway, and Tony Shan from Manolin, a company based in the US and in Norway, and Manolin specializes in providing analytics for aquaculture farms. Now, Norway is a small country of only 5.3 million inhabitants, but when it comes to seafood, we are a superpower. Norway is the world's second largest exporter of seafood, second only to China. Today, we will talk about farmed fish, and we will talk about how people are starting to expect fast changes, as they've seen a lot of those over the last year and a half during the pandemic. The COVID-19 has really shown us that even large systems and businesses can do fast turnarounds if needed. So today, in our second version of the series Synchronized Swimming, we will look at sustainability, biology, and technology, and we will look at the importance of fish welfare, traceability and transparency, and environmental aspects of fish farming. And we will try to look at how we can find tangible solutions to some of the issues we're dealing with here. Now, we only have 30 minutes, and these are broad topics, but we will try and make some sense of this and touch on some important aspects. Ingebjørg, when we talk about the importance of fish welfare or animal welfare, as it is often referred to as, it is obvious that people are only becoming increasingly more concerned about what ends up on their plate. How was the life of this animal that is now on my plate? For example, when you go to Costco here in the US and you want to have salmon or trout from Norway, over the Norway fish, there's always a big sign saying free of antibiotics, free of GMO. So people are really increasingly concerned about what's in their fish.
Well, food production must take place under conditions that meet the requirements linked to the environment, welfare, and end product. And from when aquaculture industry took off 40, 50 years ago, we have come quite a long way since then. And you mentioned the GMOs and antibiotics. Well, we don't have any GMOs in feed or animals in Norway. However, much has changed since the regulations of the GMOs came in Norway in the 1990s. Then, GMOs was often made by transferring scales of treats from one species to a different species. And the goal was to make the animals to grow faster or the crop to be more resistant to herbicides. And today we see the gene editing tools have become much more accurate and refined, and it's not very different from the changes that can happen spontaneously in a species. And gene editing methods like CRISPR is still defined as a GMO in Norway and the EU, but we do see changes that happen both UK and EU. And what if we could improve animal welfare by making the animals more resistant to a disease? Would that be a positive thing or would it be a negative thing? So there are different sides of different aspects of this topic. And there are definitely ethical topics we need to discuss. And when it comes to the antibiotic sides of things, did you know that thanks to efficient vaccines, Norway produces approximately 1.4 million tons of salmon yearly, but only 200 kilos of antibiotics are used. And that would not have been possible without the development of efficient and safe vaccines. And every single salmon in aquaculture today is vaccinated at least against 5 different diseases. And yet still the industry is meeting challenges and new diseases are emerging. The bottleneck in the industry is still biology, and we see that the technology can solve so many of the challenges we have. And it will be interesting to hear from Tony how technology can take this further.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to hear about all the regulations that have taken place. And quite frankly, many of them have been around for quite a while. I think from the technology side, what you're seeing from the farmers are a different angle towards approaching fish welfare as well. And, a couple of different categories, that they're focusing on. I think number one, you're seeing a lot of trying to create lower stress environments for the animals. So this comes across whether it's wellboat design or cage design. Farmers are always trying to figure out how to handle their fish less, as the letting the fish stay in their pens creates much better fish welfare. I think companies like Hydrolyster and Stim, they've created a lot of effort into designing boats where fish aren't handled quite as much whenever they're needing to go through a treatment or if they're going through transport. I think another area that farmers have really focused on is on providing healthy feeds, whether that's adding alternative ingredients such as algae or attempts to try to reduce the amount of wild caught fish that are used within fish feeds. There's been a lot of developments over the last 20 to 30 years from the fish feed department. And Ingebjørg, I know Salmon Group's pretty involved from the feed perspective, and I was hoping you could add some additional thoughts there.
Yeah, and well, from nature, a grown salmon eats quite a lot of fish. However, that puts a pressure on the wild stock fisheries. If we would feed our fish only wild caught fish. And still, a salmon needs a diet with certain levels of fatty acids like omega-3s, which normally is covered by eating other fish. While technology has once again proven to solve some of these bottlenecks, we can now produce algae that contains these fatty acids, making it possible to lower the amount of marine ingredients in the diet. However, we are constantly looking for new sustainable feed ingredients. And the goal must be to use feed ingredients that covers the nutritional needs for the fish, but does not overexploit our wild fishery stocks nor the rainforests. And we are seeing broad initiatives to research and development of new ingredients. You have mentioned algae. We have seen initiatives involving insects, bacterial flora, and these are just a few of the very exciting new ingredients that I think we will see more from in the near future.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's two other categories, and you've mentioned one from the technology point of view when it comes to fish welfare, and I'm heavily involved in the other. But number one was going to be vaccines and, this translation of human health and advanced medicines towards fish farming. I mean, I've seen companies, startups such as Biofin, larger companies such as Elanco and Zoetis who are providing RNA, DNA vaccines towards the fish. And like you mentioned, most of the fish within Norway are vaccinated against multiple different types of actual illnesses. I think the importance of creating high-end medicine towards our agricultural products is really important. And the second piece of technology that we've seen within Norway, because a lot of the focus is on disease and health management, is on predictive solutions and helping farmers become more predictive, as opposed to reactive over health issues. And my company, Manolin, is really focused on predicting whenever health issues and diseases are going to spread towards a farm. But it's a really critical component, especially when it comes to a fish, farming like salmon, where immune systems aren't as robust as terrestrial animals. So being able to react ahead of time is critically important when it comes to farming in the ocean.
Very interesting. Very interesting. It's, this prediction thing, I think, has a great potential. It's, of course, makes a big difference if you can plan ahead. And of course, it's always a big challenge when what you are working with is, in fact, biology. It is alive and it's growing in the middle of nature as well. So anything can happen, really. When it comes to the topic of traceability and transparency, Ingebjørg, that is also completely vital to this form of production.
Absolutely. Documentation, transparency, and traceability are key to meet both consumers' demands and building trust for the industry. Only by providing information on how the salmon is produced and under what conditions it is produced, the industry will be taken as a genuine partner for sustainable food production. However, we do lack the ability to handle the salmon as individuals. If we manage to recognize and register all fish as individuals, we could much easier treat one-on-one fish if needed. Today, fish are treated as a group, which is not always relevant or necessary.
And trust, I think, is just becoming even more important with what we have seen going through the COVID. I think that people have become awakened to some things that are now much more important than they used to be. And trust is certainly a really main point here. And I don't know, Tony, if you have any comments regarding that. How can we build this trust and how can we secure this traceability from a technological point of view?
Sure. I think the salmon industry is really well positioned to establish that, and trust is like you're saying, such a critical component. When you're talking about transparency, traceability, what you hear in the news is a lot of buzzwords such as blockchain certifications, various ways to connect together data. But the simple fact of it at the end of the day is salmon farming really is the most traceable industry when it comes to animal agriculture. The amount of data that exists that you can follow an animal is more than you see in many other industries. It's, in my mind, from what I've seen, it's incredible that you can follow the genetics of a fish and its family from where it was raised, where it was moved, exactly how much feed, medicine, vaccines were actually fed to the animal. Like Ingebjørg said, we may not have that granularity to track individual fish, but at a scale, across the entire country in Norway, you really can follow these fish from the second they're born to when they were harvested. And for an industry like seafood, where traceability and that trust is oftentimes really hard to find, the data exists. You can follow salmon from its inception all the way until when it's harvested. And you can thank companies such as Aqua Group, ScaleAQ, Maritech. All these systems that farmers use in the day-to-day help ensure that there's all this data available. We don't necessarily need blockchain or fancy technologies to weave it together. The data's there, and we can really tell that entire story from start to finish.
And you mentioned a couple of companies there, and I was just thinking as you mentioned that maybe we cannot only thank those companies, but maybe we can also thank the modern way of working, of how people are now sharing information and really working together to solve problems. How have you experienced that from Manolin?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think this last year has changed a lot of businesses, and ourselves included. We have teams in Norway and the States, and I used to travel quite a bit, and I think you're seeing the same from the farmers. This adoption of technology is happening faster than ever. Teams have been required to sit on video calls and utilize technology as part of the way that they work a lot more, and we've seen the same. I think the advantage of the salmon industry has been it's not only the adoption that's happening right now, but its history of having more and more technology as part of it. From our company, our goal is breaking down a lot of the data silos that exist. So, linking together generations of salmon data to be able to find new insights. What's really advantageous for the industry is salmon has had technology solutions on the farms for the last 20 to 30 years. You have multiple generations of structured data that we can work with. You don't really find that in many other agricultural and particularly aquaculture industries.
And it is funny when we're talking about these matters because we are all sort of becoming used to things being so easy to fix, like I was saying in my introduction, that you're almost expecting that you can recognize every single salmon. A lot of people don't know this, but when you have a salmon pen, it is 98% water and 2% fish. But of course, when you're sort of sitting in front of the screens and watching your salmon as they would in the control room, it's just a lot of salmon. But I have to admit that I am kind of expecting that pretty soon we can recognize every individual. How far away do you think that is, Tony?
I think we're getting very close towards it. I mean, I think that what I've seen, when I went to school, Fitbits and iPhones had just started. We're only looking at 10 years of really this IoT revolution. And you can imagine in the ocean space, it's even harder trying to maintain sensors, internet connectivity out in these remote places is very difficult. But I mean, you're seeing really interesting companies, whether it's camera companies like Aquabite, Cermaq with their iFarm project, project, there's a lot of ways that people are utilizing IoT and kind of sensors to try to solve these problems. I think we are very close. We're only a couple of years away, maybe. I think a lot of the companies already have prototypes. At the end of the day, and one of the things you've mentioned is this is a big problem. There's a lot of scale. There's a lot of fish in a pen. So you're having to solve problems of being able to have cameras that can look far enough, clarity within the water. But we are getting a lot closer, and you're seeing technologies come again from many other industries towards solving these challenges.
And that is also something that has definitely changed. Like I mentioned before, I mean, you are now very openly talking about all your competing companies and all the companies that you're working with, because you're all kind of seeing yourselves as colleagues, even if you are also competing at some stages, which is great if we want to bring this industry forward even further. And then when we look at the environmental aspects of fish farming, initially I was saying that the term sustainability is now to an increasing degree replaced by the term regeneration. We are expecting more. We're not just expecting people to tread carefully, but maybe to even mitigate harm done in the past. Ingebjørg, what is it like for this industry that we're talking about now, the fish farming?
Well, if you're looking at all types of food production, it will interfere with nature somehow, also aquaculture. Fortunately, the Norwegian authorities have requirements on how much impact is allowed for the production of farmed fish. So in aquaculture, we see especially the impact emissions of organic compounds from feces, uneaten fodder, and nutrient salts. Environmental service of the impact of the seabed from the farms is a legal obligation, so every farm needs to do so. And samples are taken both under and surrounding the plants. And one production that normally would take about 18 months or so can be surveyed several times. And after ending a production cycle, the site is mandatory followed a minimum for 2 months, ensuring regeneration at the sea bottom. And if you remove a site forever, there will be almost no traces from the production just after a few months, which is quite cool, actually.
This is quite remarkable, because a couple of months, that is nothing when you think about the type of production we're talking about, and we're talking about some large installments.
Of course, we do need to think about underwater currents and things like that. So no farm is the same as another one, but there are definitely possibilities there.
Tony, from a technological perspective, how far have we come? What are we doing? What's the future?
I think this is one of the fascinating parts of the industry. And, this is where a lot of collaboration happens. And like Ingebjørg mentioned, a lot of research in every single farm is different. What I've seen is a ton of advanced research within the field. One of my teammates, Natalie, one of the ways that she studied in her master thesis to mitigate some of the runoff coming out of the farms is to put polychaetes or sea worms underneath a fish farm. And it would capture a lot of the feces that come out of the farm and can actually recycle that content. Other projects such as Bologna and Leroy's Ocean Forest project, they're planting seaweed, they're planting mussels around a farm to again handle a lot of that affluent that ends up coming off of it. I think what you've seen is a ton of research from the universities and research organizations around Norway really funding these projects as pilots and test examples of how we can improve this balance with the environment. And Ingebjørg mentioned, modeling the oceans. It's another area we've seen Norway focus a lot of attention on, whether it's companies like Proactima or AquaCloud. What they've done is brought in a lot of data to try to understand how ocean currents move. And I mentioned previously, IoT and sensors have become more commonplace within the oceans, and it's one of the big gaps. So as we're getting better, we can understand how these farms are spreading throughout the environment, our balance within it. And one of the pieces that we haven't mentioned has really been the development of green financing and green bonds within the industry, bringing in money for the farms to be able to spend specifically on environmental net positive activities, I think is very critical for the industry. You're seeing farms like Movie and Grieg go towards carbon credits, alternative energy, alternative feeds. They're able to bring in a lot of money to invest in newer solutions that, maybe the original cost is a little bit higher, but the payoff's definitely a net positive for the environment.
I think it's really interesting what you're touching on there, because it is the fact always that money talks. And when we're getting these green bonds on the market and things are starting to become, obviously to everybody, a great business concept as well, I think that we really have something going.
Absolutely.
Well, can I just say, Ingebjørg and Tony, it's always such a pleasure to talk to you both. And thank you for this very fast swipe through some very large and important topics. And to everybody in the audience, can I just say that if you have questions, comments, do feel free to contact us. We're always interested in talking to you. Thank you very much, Ingebjørg. Thank you very much, Tony.